And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight the Indiana Hoosiers get back to their winning ways in Assembly Hall with an 80-64 defeat of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. This is a game that did not start out well. Nebraska led early 22-17 at the under 8-minute timeout in the first half. Indiana looked pretty lethargic, but they went on a big run at the end of the first half and then kept it going in the second half to cruise down the stretch for a victory that they needed, because earlier tonight, as you may know, I'm sure by now, Penn State did Indiana a huge favor by knocking off the Iowa Hawkeyes and putting a nice, big, beautiful grimace on Fran McCaffrey's face, meaning that with Indiana's win tonight, the Hoosiers are now tied with Iowa for first place in the Big Ten. And technically, Indiana has the advantage since we beat Iowa once. But, of course, we'll have to go play Iowa again at Iowa. But there is plenty of time to look ahead to that. For now, we have a nice Indiana victory to break down, and we are going to do that for you on this episode of the Assembly Call. I am your host, Jared Morris. I will be joined by Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. Will is off tonight, but it is an excused absence because he's interviewing Brian Evans for a class project. So we will let him off for that since he's interviewing an IU legend. But let's begin tonight, as we always do, going around the horn with our opening statements, and I will start with the banner moment. And I think the banner moment is pretty clear tonight, folks. It is what Troy Williams did to start the second half. You know, I came on here on the halftime report, and if you don't know, we do a halftime report at halftime of every game. You can go to assemblycall.com/halftime and join me to break down the first half. But, you know, Indiana was up by 7, and we talked about how they needed to come out at the start of the second half, go on a run, put some distance between them and Nebraska so that Nebraska didn't have any hope, so that they wouldn't think that they could hang around. And Troy Williams basically came out and did it himself, single-handedly, going on a 4-0 run all by himself to start the second half, because he got a rebound on the first possession, then he had a drive and made the bucket on the second possession, then he blocked a shot on Nebraska's ensuing possession, and then came down and had that beautiful reverse layup after that, or actually the reverse layup came a couple possessions later when he didn't even watch the ball to see it go in. But on that other possession before, he made another bucket. It was a 4-0 run. Indiana ended up starting the second half on a 9-2 run, in which 6 of the points were scored by Troy, and it literally was peak Troy Williams. He wasn't forcing it. He was taking what the defense gave him. He was composed. He was making shots. He was active on defense. He was active on the glass. It's as good as we've seen Troy Williams play, and it didn't stop right there. He extended it and played well for pretty much the entire second half. And there are few things that can happen in an Indiana game that give you faith in this team's ability to win a Big Ten title, to make a deep run in March, than Troy Williams playing like he did tonight. Because a phrase that we haven't used much this year, that we used much more last year, is all Big Ten Troy. Because we didn't just see good Troy tonight. We saw all Big Ten Troy against Nebraska, with Williams finishing with 18 points, 3 assists, 5 rebounds. He did have 4 turnovers. 3 of them came early. But what we saw from him in the second half is what we need to see from Troy down the stretch. Because if we do, it is going to make Indiana extremely tough for anybody to beat. He was that good tonight, and he's that important to Indiana. A great, great performance by Troy in the second half, especially coming off a rough performance against Michigan State. And all of us just want to see more of that because he's capable of it, but now we've got to see it more consistently. Okay, so let's go around the horn, get some opening thoughts. Andy, we will start with you, your bottoms line on tonight's IU victory.
Well, you took quite a bit of what I had in mind. Obviously, Troy's performance was it was definitely, you know, we bypassed good Troy and went to great Troy, or all Big Ten Troy, as you mentioned. But the other guy that I really thought played well in both halves was Jawan Morgan. And I think, you know, we continue to see bench play being a really big factor for this team. I think they outscored Nebraska 26-16 in bench points tonight, and that's become a recurring theme. Now, it hasn't always been the same guy, and tonight it was Morgan's turn. Although, you know, Bielefeld had 6 points, Anunoby had a couple points as well, and Zysloff did a couple threes, but. You know, Morgan ended up with 12 points, 5 rebounds, 4 of those on the offensive end, got to the free throw line 6 times, had a steal, and really just played a good game. Just effort, and what he also allowed them to do when he was in the game was, and this is one of the things IU really had issues with in the first half was, ball screen defense. They really let, similar to what ended up happening against Michigan State, they were letting a lot of easy looks at the rim, and they started switching a lot more of those exchanges out at the top. And when they had a lineup in where Morgan was essentially playing center, they could switch everybody, and he did a really good job on a variety of different players, and we continue to see him play well on the defensive end and be really good fundamentally from that perspective. So I thought he had a really good all-around game, ran the floor well, did a good job of trying to get early post position, and that led to some good dishes from Yogi that put him to the line, and he was also able to make the pass that set up another pass to other guys to get them going, made some hustle plays diving on the floor and on the offensive glass, and just thought it was a really good showing for him. And he's quietly, I think everybody's so focused on OG lately. I think Morgan has continued to give them pretty good minutes over the last month or half month of the season, and I think he's going to continue to be good. And it's one of those where you certainly want to enjoy a game like this and the way that they played after the sluggish start, but it's hard not to look forward to what could be and what we hope will be with guys like Jawan Morgan, OG Anunoby, Robert Johnson, those kinds of projected 4-year guys, and what they can really be by the end of their IU career. And I thought this was hopefully the first of many double-digit scoring games that we see from Jawan Morgan.
Yep, absolutely. Ryan, what do you have to rant about tonight?
Well, I think I got into a discussion during the game, as it turned out to be about a 20-point lead at one point during the second half, with someone who was ripping everything that Coach Crean was doing during the game. And I think that I have not been a gigantic Crean defender, especially lately. Before this season and last season, I certainly gave him my fair share of. I shared my fair share of disapproval of him. But right now, on February 17th, Indiana is 11-3 in the Big Ten, 21-6 overall, and tied for first place in the conference with 2 top 10 teams. Maryland, assuming they win tomorrow, but you can't assume anything in the Big Ten apparently. People it feels like people are just looking for things to complain about. Yeah, tonight did not start as well as we'd hope. But Indiana went on a run without their best player playing particularly well offensively. We're able to drop 80 points on Nebraska, who is a very good defensive team, a very aggressive defensive team. I won't say good. People need to step back and enjoy this. We're 11-3 heading into a huge clash with Purdue this weekend. I don't care who we've played, who we haven't played, how we've played, whatever. This team's won 11 conference games and has taken care of pretty much every game they've supposed to have taken care of, except for that one screw-up at Penn State. So people need to just enjoy this while it's going on. There's no need to wait and see with this group anymore. This team can do something very special. I'm not saying they're going to do it. I'm not saying that this last stretch of games isn't incredibly difficult. But you know what? This team is 11-3, 21-6 overall. Definitely is going to be in the NCAA tournament. There's going to be no waiting around on Selection Sunday. It's okay to have fun with this, guys. It's okay to enjoy this. When they're going on a 30-6 run like today, it's okay to not, to let yourself go and have fun with it and praise the team, even though they didn't start the game well. Praise the team for winning. I just think it's people need to understand what this is and understand how special this has been. When you consider back the first week of December, if I told you on this date we'd be 11-3 in the Big Ten and have a chance to win the whole damn thing, you would have been pretty excited about it. And so let's enjoy what this team is doing. And tonight was another example. The team took a punch in the mouth early, responded well, made a great run at the end of the first half, started the second half well, and really ran with the game and kept Nebraska at arm's length the entire game. And that's what you're supposed to do, and they did what they were supposed to do, and we shouldn't nitpick. We should say, hey, you know what? That's a great win for this team.
Yeah, but Ryan, Indiana's offense sucks.
Oh, they're terrible. They're terrible.
I saw the Twitter conversation that you were in. It was not logical. We'll put it that way. I agree with you. You got to have fun with this. Yeah. All right. So we're
No,
gonna break it.
I mean, I'm sorry, Stephanie, but that's the whole point of this. It's supposed to be fun. Being a fan is supposed to be enjoyable. It's not supposed to kill you. And so this is, look, this team is playing well. We can enjoy the fact that they're playing well and that they're winning games and that they're undefeated at home this year. Those things are things we should celebrate. We shouldn't wait for the other shoe to drop. Maybe that comes, but you know what? We deal with that when it comes. Right now, let's enjoy the fact that they're winning and they're playing very well and enjoy. We owe that to these kids. These kids give up their college lives essentially to play on this team, and we sit there and root for them. We owe it to them to appreciate their accomplishments.
I agree wholeheartedly. Excellent rant, Ryan. Some of your best work of the season. All right, everybody. Quick reminder. Make sure that you get on our email list. The web address is assemblycall.com/subscribe. You can get on it there. Or you can text Indiana, INDIANA, to 44144. You'll get a message back. Just enter your email address. Send it back. You'll be on the list. Why do you want to be on the email list? Because we send content to our email subscribers that we don't publish anywhere else. It doesn't go on the blog. It doesn't go anywhere else. It just goes to you all. It's one of the best ways to connect with the show and to get even more insight on what we think about the Hoosiers on a game-by-game basis. We send our patented post-game emails at 6:30 Central Time the morning after every game. It includes my analysis, Andy's analysis of Tom Crean's substitution patterns and lineups, Will's stat of the game. So make sure that you get on that email list because you get that and all of the other exciting messages that we send. Go to assemblycall.com/subscribe or text Indiana to 44144. All right, everybody, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. We are breaking down Indiana's 80-64 victory over the Nebraska Cornhuskers tonight. And let's talk a little bit about Yogi Ferrell, Ryan, because you mentioned that Indiana was playing without its best player, really shooting well, really doing much on offense. And it was another rough shooting night for Yogi. He was 2 of 8 from the field. He was 1 of 5 from downtown. But I will say this, not all 1 of 5s are created equal. And I think what we saw tonight is the progression for Yogi from his first shot to his last shot, where the first shot, he was running after it before it even hit the rim, which is a sure sign of a shooter who's not very confident. But by the end, he looked really confident shooting. The only problem is that basket just seems to hate him because he had 2 that literally it almost felt like they were in the basket and someone popped them out. They went down so far. So he did make one. A couple others popped out. He had the 3 at the end of the first half that went in. To me, I thought we saw a guy that busted out of his shooting slump, even if the numbers didn't really seem to show it. And I'm really expecting a big shooting night from him against Purdue, assuming that Indiana can get him free for some good looks like they did more in the second half. But despite the poor shooting, I still thought Yogi contributed a lot on both ends because I thought his defense on Andrew White was really good. He denied Andrew White the ball, really made him work for his 15 points. And that there were several possessions where he closed out well on White. And then I thought in the first half, when Indiana's offense had been kind of scuffling and then they went on that big run, a big part of it was because Yogi got more active. And he wasn't forcing shots. He didn't get frustrated, but he kept the ball moving. He only had 4 assists tonight, but it felt like more. And so I thought this was one of those games for Yogi where it's not going to go down as memorable in the stat sheet. And, for people who are thinking about Big Ten Player of the Year, they're just going to look at the stat line and say Yogi had another rough game. But I thought for the most part he played pretty well and did a nice job of not forcing it when stuff was going on for other guys. And I want to get both your guys' thoughts on him. Ryan, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, I thought Yogi actually played a pretty solid game despite the misses from 3 and from the field. He got to the free throw line, too, at a few key spots, just driving hard and getting fouled and knowing what the officials were calling and going after it. 6 of 7 from the free throw line. As you said, 4 assists, 2 rebounds, really played, I thought, a good all-around game. One thing you've got to tip your cap to Nebraska on is the fact that they play really aggressive man-to-man on the perimeter, and it's really hard to get open looks if you're the guy they're focused on. So I think that Nebraska really focused on taking Yogi out of the game and really focused on pressuring him when he had the ball. or when he was coming off of screens to make sure he didn't get a clean look. And they did a really good job of that. I mean, you've got to kind of tip your cap to them on that. I thought they played very good defense on him. But here's the thing, is that what the takeaway from this game should be is that, again, Yogi struggled, didn't have, the game we're typically used to seeing, just like against Iowa last week. But everybody else picked up their game, and everybody, we're not a one-player team anymore. I mean, everybody else picked up their game. Hartman had 8, Troy Williams had 18, Thomas Bryant had 4. You've got Rob Johnson with 13, Jawan Morgan with 12, Max Bielfeldt with 6, Zaislov with 6. So everybody contributed. I mean, these people, this team all stepped up and filled a role to help supplement the fact that Yogi wasn't just bombing away and scoring. And that's encouraging, because when Yogi gets on track, now those other guys know they can contribute as well, and the team has more confidence as a whole. So while these Yogi struggles are not good to see, because look, if we're going to make a run in March, if we're going to make a run at the Big Ten title, he's got to get it on, because get his game up to speed, because in those big games we're going to count on him late, especially. So that is a necessity for this team, but at the same time you're seeing other guys step up and fill those roles, much like when James Blackman Jr. went down. Other guys stepped up and filled that role. So it's a positive to see everything else kind of happening around Yogi. Now we just need to get him back to where we know he's capable of playing.
And to me, it's just that difference between shooting well and playing well. He's not shooting well, but I feel like he's been playing really well. Andy, your thoughts on Yogi?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it on Twitter, at least. One of his first shots, he really hunted the shot, and I think he was trying to make a play, and they had gotten down early and took a long 2-point jumper that I said something. You can get that shot whenever you want. But I really thought, other than that, played under control. He made a lot of nice passes to Jawan Morgan early in the first half that really led to some of his free throws as well. And like you guys said, got to the line 7 times and did a really good job in that regard. So I thought he didn't really force the action in a game when eventually he didn't need to. So I thought he continued to play a pretty good all-around floor game. I think everybody's worried about the shots. I think everybody pointed to this game and said maybe this is a game where they get up big and he can get a little bit of rest, and he ends up playing 36 minutes, and that was it was clear that was going to be out the window midway through the first half. They just probably weren't going to be up by enough to get him some rest. But I also think he's a guy who just needs to keep being out there, keep shooting. Shot a lot more confidently at the end, as you mentioned, and had a few rim out. So I definitely don't feel like it's a confidence issue from him at this point. And I think that's probably what would worry you. But at this point, he's made enough big shots, been in enough big games that I think he's going to be okay, and hopefully save some makes for the Purdue game on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think another guy that we need to see shoot well, especially on Saturday, and who really has been, is Robert Johnson. And Andy, I want to get your thoughts on Robert as the official president of his fan club still, because he's now been in double digits 4 out of the last 5 games. He had 16 against Michigan, 13 against Iowa, 11 against Michigan State, 13 tonight. And he's taken at least 4 3-pointers in each of those games. And I think what we're seeing from him is a lot more confidence. And he's been able to get assists too. He had 3 tonight, had 5 against Michigan State, 5 back in the Penn State game. Been getting some rebounds. He's really been quietly playing much better and much more consistent, which is what we've wanted from him, because he's been a guy who's kind of, stepped up and had a big game and then would disappear. He seems like he's starting to come into his own as a guy that Indiana can count on game in, game out.
Yeah, he really – it's funny because the Minnesota game that we went to, he shot 1 of 6 and took some pretty ugly – well, the result of them was pretty ugly shots late in the game. But the one thing I took away from that was, in a tight game, he had the confidence to put up shots that, while they did not, the end result was not good. It felt like he had kind of turned a corner from where he was earlier in the season, when he really wasn't trusting his shot and struggled through some of those early Big Ten games. And so now you see the fruits of that confidence, starting to pay dividends, because, as you said, he's really stepping into these shots. Some of the threes he's making are contested, but he's, stepping into them with such confidence and really playing well. And the other thing that's been a big issue with him that's been brought up is turnovers, and he hasn't had more than 2 turnovers in a game in about a month. The first Minnesota game he had 3, he had 5 in that first Wisconsin game, but really other than that in Big Ten play, he's had, ones, twos, or zero in that column. And that becomes really important for this team as well because we saw early in the game tonight they didn't take good care of the ball. We've seen that throughout the course of the season. And he was one of the main culprits and one of the guys who made it feel like I don't know how this team's going to play when Yogi's not on the floor. And while the dynamic is different with Yogi out there and it forces the defense to, react and account for him, certainly you don't get quite the same fear, I guess, that things might completely unravel when he's off the court. So at least to the extent that there are opportunities to get Yogi a little more rest as we move forward, I think both coaches and fans, coaches most importantly, are having a lot more confidence in what Robert can do, while he's running the show. And then you've also seen, Hartman bring the ball up the floor and other guys initiate the offense as well. So that burden hasn't totally fallen on Robert Johnson like we thought that it might. But again, I think confidence with him is really the big thing at this point. You can just tell at this point that he's really comfortable in his role. I think he's settled into what he needs to do with Blackman out, and really has embraced that and is playing really well.
Let's talk a little bit more about Jawan Morgan, too. Andy, you mentioned him in your opening statement. Ryan, I want to get your thoughts on him. OG has been a guy that everybody has kind of talked about, and people want him starting and all of this. And I think all of the positive thoughts about OG have been good. But to a certain extent over the past, 5, 6, maybe 7 games, I actually feel like Jawan has been a bit more consistent than OG. You look at it tonight, and OG didn't play poorly, but only had 2 points, did have 6 rebounds, so he led the team in rebounds, but really, missed 3 free throws, never quite got into a rhythm, and frankly, I didn't think played very good defensively tonight. They highlighted a play where he got beaten out on the perimeter by a smaller guy, but OG is really good defensively when he's playing low, and his defensive fundamentals looked a little bit lazy tonight, whereas you get a guy like Jawan Morgan in there, has his career game with 12 points, he has 4 offensive rebounds, and we saw him play late against Iowa and really improve the defense, and it seems like the defense always becomes more energetic, takes a step up now when Jawan is on the floor. And I'm not saying this to try and pit these two guys against each other. They're terrific freshmen who are showing great signs for the future. But I feel as much as we want to get OG more time, Jawan to me seems like a guy that has really earned more playing time. And frankly, whenever our defense, hits the skids a little bit and we need a boost on defense, he's the guy that I want going in there because he makes hustle plays. He seems to be in the right position at the right time, and is a smart defender. I mean, you saw him, there was a great play at the end of this Nebraska game where he got switched onto a shorter guy, stayed low, forced him to the baseline, and forced to travel, which not a lot of guys his size and as a freshman are going to be able to do. So just a guy who continues to impress and needs to see more time. And, of course, if Troy keeps playing well, if Max, is playing well, we're not going to have enough minutes to go around, but that, I guess, is a nice problem to have.
Yeah, I think they'll find minutes for him. The thing I love about Jawan Morgan is it's in slow, steady growth. He had that leg injury, kind of took him out of his rhythm, but he was, the number 2 freshman in this group, originally, and people thought, and Anunoby sort of had a chance to pass him, and Anunoby's been phenomenal. I don't think people, this discussion, I don't want people, as you said, I don't want people to think we're saying one's better than the other or whatever. They will really complement each other in the future. What I love about Morgan is he just doesn't do anything wrong. He's always in the right place. He has an innate feel for the game. It's sort of like a Colin Hartman kind of guy who can just find a spot on the floor where he's comfortable and not hurt you in any way. And then defensively, he can really help. I think he's a guy who's just so fundamentally sound defensively. He'll get beaten from time to time, just like OG will get beaten from time to time because they're freshmen and they're young and they're learning. So experienced guys are going to beat him, or guys who have more playing time than them are going to beat him. Offensively, there's no flash to him whatsoever. He's just a workman-like guy, gets the ball low, goes up strong, gets fouled, doesn't shy away from contact. He stepped out tonight and hit a 3 that I don't think many people were expecting, but that's in his game. It's not a consistent shot yet, but it will be. And so he's just a guy who can do a lot of different things and is kind of a Swiss Army knife. He can guard on the perimeter. It's not his forte, but he can step out there and guard. He can play on offense around the perimeter, although he typically is more comfortable at this point because of where he's played his entire life, is being in the paint somewhere. So tonight you saw them go small with him, being a guy who could handle the ball, but also line up in the paint and on offense, post up, try and make some stuff happen from there. So Yeah, I mean, they're both great. Anunoby, it feels like now everybody knows about him. He's probably in scouting reports. Don't lay off this kid. He can do some stuff. So Morgan's kind of come in over the last couple of weeks and filled that role a little bit. But you're going to see both of them play well. I think that Anunoby is going to now have to adjust a little bit of his game because now people know that if he gets the ball in the post, he's going to turn around and try and put it in the hoop. And so they actually have to play defense on him. And so you saw that tonight a little bit. Nebraska went very aggressively at him when he tried to score. And to his credit, he kept trying. It wasn't he didn't shy away from the challenge. But yeah, so I think he's got some adjusting to do. Morgan has really kind of slipped in there and is playing well. And I think it's great to see that this entire freshman class is contributing in different ways. And they're all key parts of the team now. And it's late in the year, and these guys are all filling key roles. And that's great to see, and it's great for Indiana's future.
I feel a hashtag coming on Jawan Morgan things, kind of like Colin Hartman things, where he just does the dirty work. And by the way, how come Better Than Advertised Bielfeldt caught on, but the Junkyard Dog hasn't yet caught on for Jawan Morgan? That's like the perfect nickname for him, because that's what he does.
Because Better Than Average Bielfeldt's better, Jared.
By the way, I want to say the chat is really lively tonight, considering it was a home game against Nebraska, which doesn't tend to be the most lively chat nights because people take it for granted, all of that. So big shout out to Dan and Jeff and Charles and Brenda and Brian and everybody who's in there. It's awesome seeing you. And by the way, Brenda had a great comment. And Andy, let me kick this over to you. We need to create new expletives for what Colin Hartman did tonight on that great play where he almost fumbles the ball out of bounds and then drives down and does a great Will Sheehy impression by just dunking on the Nebraska player, causing Bob Wenzel to exclaim that he didn't know Colin Hartman could dunk, which, why you got to cast aspersions on the white guys, Bob Wenzel? Like, what's up with that, Anyway, not sure Bob Wenzel's ever watched Indiana play outside of the games that he's announced, but either way, a solid night from Colin Hartman.
Are we sure he's actually watching while he's announcing? I don't think he is.
I don't know.
A fair argument could be made that he does not watch the games he announces.
It's possible. But a good game from Hartman, 8 points. He had an assist, he had 5 boards, he had a steal, he had a block, just a solid game. And I actually thought one of the threes, I think he hit a three when it was 22-17 that made it 22-20 and really seemed to give Indiana a lift. And just, again, one of those Colin Hartman things where he's making big plays when his team needs them.
Yeah, I mean, I think this just feels like a game where you could go down the line of everybody who played and talk about something positive that they brought to the table, and I think he has continued to do that, do a little bit of everything for this team. And again, typically his, I hate to use the whole basketball IQ and that whole nonsense, but it does. You look at some of the plus minus numbers consistently when he's out there, and he just. We talked about this last year on the team when at that point, nobody seemed to know where to be defensively. He always seemed to know, and I thought he, continues to do a good job there. And a little bit like Morgan gives them some versatility. He can guard some different positions and does a good job of, switching things out front and staying in front of guys. So I thought he hit a couple really big threes, both of those, and then the unexpected dunk apparently because he hadn't dunked in approximately 2 games since the Iowa game. So that was really a long time coming, obviously, for Mr. Wenzel.
All right, so we want to talk a little bit more Troy because we need to get more into Troy's performance tonight. And I also want to talk some Thomas Bryant, which we will get to here in a minute. I do want to let everybody know that because of popular demand, so some of you know that we put up on our website for sale these coasters, the Assembly Call coasters. They're made out of limestone because how Bloomington and how Indiana is that. They're adorned with our Assembly Call logo. I actually sent these to members of our team, the members of our chat team, as Christmas presents this year, and people liked them, and so we put them up for sale on the site, and they've been selling like crazy. Tons of people have been buying these. Part of the reason is because they look really cool, and the other part is because 25% of the proceeds actually goes to support the show, which we really, really appreciate. And you can get those at assemblycall.com/gear. Now, the other item that we just put up because of popular demand is the sweatshirt, and Ryan has this sweatshirt. His was the first one in existence in the history of the world, a hoodie with the Assembly Call logo on it. If you're watching us live, you can see Ryan down here.
It's right here, folks.
There you go.
What we're talking about.
You can see it. Brian Tonsony, who runs our chat for us, one of the guys who runs our chat, he's got one. And if you would like one of those sweatshirts, you can go to assemblycall.com/gear. It's there. 20% of the proceeds for that sweatshirt go to the Assembly Call. And so we greatly appreciate you wanting stuff with our logo on it, wearing it out, and buying it because it helps to support the show. So thank you very much. And again, it's assemblycall.com/gear. All right, well, we are rolling on this episode of the Assembly Call, this fun, exuberant, victorious episode of the Assembly Call, breaking down Indiana's 16-point victory over Nebraska. Let's talk a little bit more Troy. Ryan, I know that you have some lingering thoughts on Troy that you want to discuss because, him playing like he did tonight is so important. And I will say this, what I was almost more impressed by than how he started the second half is that after Coach Crean took him out and he came back in, he stayed under control. Sometimes you fear that when a couple of those wild shots go in, he's going to think that he can do that every time. And I thought Nebraska D'd him up a little bit more, and so he didn't get as many looks after that start to the second half, but he didn't force it, and he stayed under control. He had one more turnover, but it was on the last time he touched the ball late in the game, kind of a meaningless little turnover. Just stayed composed and was doing what he does when he plays well, and it was so great to see. Now the question is, can he bottle it? Can he harness it? Can we see that against a team like Purdue that is going to play much better defense in the paint when he drives in there than Nebraska did?
It really is. What I tweeted out during the game is it really is amazing how easy Troy makes the game look when he's under control and playing with confidence and focused and not being loose with the ball and not just kind of flying around without thinking first. It really is staggering. And I think on one game, I think it was the Iowa game, maybe the Michigan game, Dan Dockich said Troy Williams makes basketball hard sometimes, and he makes it too hard. And he's, Dan Dockich, huge fan of the show. He's a huge fan of the show. He was right in that instance. I mean, he really hit the nail on the head. Troy makes it too difficult on himself sometimes. When he simplifies things and when he just focuses and eases up on the throttle, he is so good at basketball. Like, he is so good and so talented. And this guy that played tonight, and we were hard on Troy last game, and I had to explain, it's not that I don't like Troy. I expect a lot out of Troy, and I think that's fair. And this is what we expect. This was a fantastic game. He 18. I don't expect him to get 18 points every game, but I expect him to be that aggressive force that really should be, there all the time for Indiana. And he's a weapon. And when he just focuses and plays the right way and calms down and thinks before he moves, he is so good at basketball, and he is such a good player. And his ceiling is so high, you just wanted to hit it. And I think that tonight he really did play an outstanding basketball game after those early turnovers, and really got in the flow of the game and played aggressive, and he played smart, and he was efficient. 8 of 9 from the field. I mean, how often have we said that about Troy Williams? 8 of 9 from the field, focused, played very well, and good for him. He responded to that bad Michigan State game.
Andy, you have some quotes from Tom Crean about Troy Williams to share, which I saw him too, and they're great.
Yeah, there were a couple of crazy upsets happening. Texas Tech just beat Oklahoma, and Duke won at North Carolina within the last 30 seconds.
Your little bracketology brain must be just bursting right now.
Well, it really is. North Carolina, for everything everybody said, basically just gave the game away in the second half. Duke has 5 players healthy at this point, and they refuse to go inside, so that's always cool. Anyway, So, Crean said, I love Troy. Troy's got unique talents, but sometimes he's his own worst enemy. That's the way Troy needs to play. And just kind of talked a little bit about, needs to play in the attacking yet reading way that he did in the second half. At least that's the way Brody Miller paraphrased it. And, it's funny because he really did. It wasn't even that, we talk a lot about him playing really well, off the ball, but tonight a lot of the good that he did came with the ball in his hands, but he was just smarter with it about where he was going. He tried to drive away from traffic instead of into it, at least after a rough, early early going with that, but there were a couple of times where the floor just kind of opened up, and he took it right to the basket and was able to do some things well there. So I think, like Crean said, being able to kind of read the situation a little bit better, at least that's what I take away from that quote, was definitely different and kind of picking his spots a bit better. And certainly at some point, I think Troy is definitely a guy who, for all the talent he has, I think confidence can sometimes I think he can be overconfident. I think sometimes he just thinks he's going to play his way out of it. But I thought you really started to see him feel good about what he was doing, play with confidence, put the ball on the floor, and have an idea of what he wanted to do, where he was going with it, whether that was passing or shooting. Just seemed to be a lot more under control, and I guess that's probably the best way to sum it up was just under control.
Under control, and again, he's going to have to do that Saturday against Purdue. If you think back to last year, Indiana got in so much trouble, especially in the game at Purdue, driving in and getting their shots blocked, or just driving in and having nowhere to go. And tonight when Troy drove in, there were opportunities, and he was able to make some of those shots, and he was able to get his reverse layups, and that's great, but Nebraska is much softer inside than Purdue. And so the one little kind of fear that you have coming out of a game like this is you like Troy having confidence, and you hope that he can take what he did tonight and realize that there were openings there, he attacked, they were smart, but then remember that what he did the second part of that second half, when he didn't force it and continued to let the game come to him, got to do that as well against Purdue, because they will swallow Troy up if he just tries to drive in there wildly. So he's got to guard against that. It'll be a big key for Indiana winning. Let's talk real quick about Thomas Bryant. Because, this is a game I think a lot of people looked at and expected him to come out and have a big game. He had 19 points against Nebraska the first time, was 8 of 10 from the field. Again, they don't have a great interior defense, so you thought this would be another big game for him, but he never got in the flow. Only 4 points. He only had 2 field goal attempts. He made both of them, had a couple of turnovers. One was a really bad pass, had a 3-second call against him. And it breaks, a streak of games for Thomas where he had been relatively consistent. 10 points against Michigan State, even though he was only 4 of 11. 10 against Iowa. 10 against Penn State. And he'd been getting rebounds, too. 8 rebounds, 7, 5. Tonight, only the 4 points, only the 2 rebounds. And, Ryan, let me state an observation. You can tell me if I'm crazy or not. Does it feel like Thomas Bryant gets zero benefit of the doubt with the officials? Like, if anything is close on a foul, it seems like it's being called a foul against him. And maybe that's just, and I don't, again, tell me if I'm wrong. And I'm wondering if any of that has to do with early in the season, his demonstrativeness after calls and complaining about every call, which to his credit we're not seeing anymore. But do you think there's anything to that, or do you think I'm crazy and that's a ridiculous hypothesis?
No, I think he's a freshman big man in the Big Ten. He's not going to get calls, and he's going to get calls against him. I don't know if it has anything to do with his demeanor or anything like that, because I don't think officials are that, are that plugged into what's going on. I think they make their calls and walk away for the most part, and only really get into it if guys chase them down. Sure, they're aware of it, but it's not, well, now this kid yelled at me, so I'm going to get him back, or anything like that. I just think that he's a freshman big man in the Big Ten, and he doesn't get the benefit of really any calls. I mean, that over-the-back call, he got penalized for being taller than the guy in front of him. I mean, that was so stupid. It was such a cheap call. I thought the officiating tonight wasn't good either way. I thought that Tim Miles, when he got that technical foul, I thought that he earned the technical, but I did not blame him for being upset. Those are two guys that bumped into each other, and that's a 50-50 call, and it should have been a no call instead of a push-off on his guy. I totally agreed with that.
Mike Davis actually thinks Miles was pretty composed in his reaction.
Exactly. With Thomas, I think it tonight, one of the differences was this was the first time that a team really aggressively doubled the post on him. I mean, we've seen teams rotate over a little to double, but they really went hard after the post in this game, and that was because we beat them up in the post in the first matchup. So they're a smaller, quicker team on the perimeter that really doubled hard on him, and it bothered him. It clearly did. He tried to turn around and drive a few times and was driving into 2 people. He did have 3 assists on 3 plays that were really nice, where he recognized the double was coming and kicked it out. But I think that with how hard they were doubling, we didn't need him to score tonight, because that always left somebody open. It always left a gap in the defense. And I think that Indiana had trouble dealing with that offensively the first few minutes of the game, maybe the first 10 minutes of the game, really dealing with, okay, where are the openings going to come from? Who are they doubling off? Recognizing that. And once they diagnosed it and figured it out, Indiana started being able to get some open looks. But yeah, I just thought, again, with Bryant, you've got to tip your hat to Nebraska. He's a guy who's much bigger than anybody they have, much more talented than anybody they have in the post. And they harassed him by running doubles at him, and he clearly was not comfortable with it. Indiana went small for a huge portion of the game, so neither Bryant nor Bielfeldt was in the game. So he just didn't have many opportunities. And it might be a good thing that he didn't have really an outright amazing game right before Purdue, because I think that he's going to have to look at the film and understand that that against Purdue he's got to be on top of his game, and he's got to adjust and make adjustments for the bad things he did in this game. And look, we're going to need he and Bielfeldt to have big games against Purdue, both of them, and he cannot pick up cheap fouls. Whatever he does, he can't pick up cheap fouls. So hopefully he'll look at this as an opportunity to get better and to adjust from what didn't work tonight and move forward and come out in that Purdue game and have a great game, because we're going to need him.
One more topic on this game before we move ahead and look at Purdue. Andy, let's talk briefly about the defense, because I thought early in the game, again, it was a slow start for Indiana tonight, and I thought it was especially slow on defense. And I thought, frankly, for the first 12 minutes of the game, we saw a continuation of the defense against Michigan State, where it was, the old, if you're going to let them drive by you. And, Crean talked about it in the Michigan State game, how we let their stars be too comfortable. And I thought we were letting Nebraska be too comfortable. Guys were able to drive wherever they wanted. They were able to get some offensive rebounds. And then it really looked like Indiana tightened things up some. Part of that was getting some different combinations out there that worked. Part of it was, I think, Yogi really stepping it up on defense. What did you see? Because, Nebraska was scoring at a pretty high clip there early on, and they finished the game with 1.03 points per possession, which, with Siobhan Shields out, you probably want to hold them under that. But considering how the game started, I think you have to feel pretty happy with the defense over about the final 25 minutes or so tonight.
Yeah, it seemed like I thought exactly what you did, where it felt like deja vu of the Michigan State game, the way guys were driving to the basket off of ball screens. So it seemed like in the second half, we touched on this a little bit earlier, that IU switched a lot more of those exchanges. I think the only one they weren't switching was whether when Bielfeldt and Bryant were out there. But everybody else, on this team with so many guys in that 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" range, that they should feel comfortable doing that. And so, they went to that a little bit more in the second half. I thought guys helped a little bit more defensively to try to step in and clog the lane a bit. Nebraska did get some kickouts for three early in the first half, but I think, when you look at what they've done and how they've shot the ball overall through the course of the season, I don't know that that's sustainable. They're right in the middle of the pack in three-point shooting in the Big Ten, but then just doesn't feel like, without Shields in particular, White is really the only guy that you felt like you couldn't leave out there. But anybody else, I don't know if they were still in that kind of, not over helping off of shooters mindset from the Michigan State game, but it seemed like they were really reluctant to have guys step in. And so when they would turn the corner and have a wide open lane to the basket, it was exactly that, a wide open lane to the basket. And so I thought they did a lot better job in the second half of doing that, clogging up the lane a little bit more, trying to force Nebraska to make shots. I just thought the intensity was better too, though. X's and O's aside, while they did make some changes that I thought were positive, they just seemed to be a little bit more locked in, a little bit more excited to play defense, I guess, in a way that we had seen early in the Big Ten season. And so what you hope isn't happening is that a product of playing better on offense. We talked so many times last year that this team seemed to derive its defensive intensity from how well it was shooting the ball, and for tonight at least it seemed like that might have been the case. I hope that doesn't become a pattern, because it certainly was one that didn't work out well last season. But I thought overall intensity level, but a couple minor changes that they made. I thought switching a lot of those screens really helped, because they were able to cut off some of the driving lanes, at least slow guys down, get into the basket, allow time for the help to get there.
And interesting comment here in the chat from Jim Bernstein, who's saying, can we give Crean some credit for going with the small lineup and switching everything? Everyone complains about not making adjustments, but there's your adjustment, which kind of goes along with what you were saying, Ryan, about how people are kind of looking for reasons to nitpick and get upset and get frustrated. And there was a lot of that on Twitter during the first half of this game. But again, where I Don't think Indiana adjusted very well against Michigan State tonight. I thought they did, and I think you have to credit Crean for that because certainly did that against Iowa too. So the key now is, of course, be able to take those adjustments on the road in tougher environments against better teams, and part of that is your team being willing to do it too. And unfortunately, that didn't happen against Michigan State, but it certainly did tonight. Hey, interesting number. I just realized this. If you look at Indiana's roster, do you realize there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players on Indiana's roster who are currently shooting 40% or better from three-point range now that Jawan Morgan made that three tonight, and he's now 2 of 5 on the season. That's Burton, Nego, Morgan, Zeisloft, Hartman, Anunoby, Robert Johnson, Bielfeldt, Blackman from earlier in the season, Yogi, all shooting over 40% from downtown. The only guys not shooting 40% from downtown are Troy Williams, who's at 31.9%, and Thomas Bryant, who's only taken 7 threes all year, which is remarkable shooting from Indiana. But again, we know that the Hoosiers can shoot. That's never really been an issue. Ryan, good, interesting point in the chat. You want to chime in with that real quick?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to look at the fact that Indiana hasn't had a losing streak all season. They haven't lost after a loss this year. They've bounced back with a win after every loss. I think that's key because with a team like this, where you've got a couple leaders, a couple seniors, but a lot of younger guys, you might think that they could, falter and fall into a rut and lose a couple games in a row if things don't go their way. But like that overtime game against Wisconsin, they were able to come back and win the next week. A terrible showing against Michigan State, they were able to come back and beat Nebraska. The game against Penn State, that could have sunk them, and they could have gone and lost 3 in a row there, but they bounced back and beat Iowa. So I think that's really good to know that these guys are fixing their mistakes after losses and really balancing out their performances and stepping up and making things happen after games where they don't perform.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And it's you got to give a nod to the coaching and to the leadership of this team, to the maturity of this team to be able to do that. All right, Andy, we are going to dive into your big bracketology brain now and look ahead to the Purdue game. And real quick, I do want to let everybody know Andy's bracket updates are coming every Tuesday. You can get those. Go to assemblycall.com/bracketology. Or, of course, you can follow us on Twitter @assemblycall, @AndyBottoms. And Andy is actually starting something new. He's doing a bracket watch. It might not happen every day, but a lot of days, and he's going to kind of look at the previous night's winners and losers. And good Lord, you have your work cut out for you tonight with Iowa losing, with all the other craziness happening, so we look forward to that. But let's dial this in now on Indiana. If you would like to make any comments about Penn State beating Iowa, please do, because that was a beautiful result. And then give us the quick scouting report of Purdue, because we know that that's, it looks like a bad matchup for Indiana because of their size down low, but it's also a bad matchup for Purdue because of some of the things that Indiana does. So kind of give us kind of that overview of that matchup.
Yeah, so bracket-wise for IU, this game didn't really, losing it obviously would have had an impact, but winning it doesn't really do much. So they're probably still around that 6th spot. For those wondering, LSU did manage to lose despite having the greatest player ever tonight, so I assume that has Lenardi moving them up to like a 5 seed or something at this point. But and then as far as Iowa goes, I mean, it really hurts their chance at a 1 seed. I was looking back since 2009, there have only been 2 teams that earned 1 seeds that had a sub 100 loss, and I'm not sure how much Penn State jumped up tonight, but they were like 114th, 115th, something coming into tonight, so probably didn't jump into the top 100. So not impossible for Iowa, but I think really puts pressure on them to win the rest of their games, because other than their game against IU, they really don't have a whole lot else on the schedule. They do have Wisconsin coming up, which is becoming a more important game for them, but a potentially damaging loss for them, although apparently no one wants to get the other number 1 seed, and even Oklahoma is apparently trying to play their way off the 1 line. So as far as the Purdue game, it'll really be interesting. It's funny looking at some of these stats. I've watched Purdue a number of times this season, and I think everybody has in their mind this notion of how good they are defensively, and how hard it is to score inside on them. What's odd to me is when you look at Purdue is, kind of middle of the pack defensively in Big Ten play. They're 5th overall when you look at Pomeroy, and they're middle of the pack in 2-point defense and block percentage, and that just seems stunning to me given the size that they have inside. And I look back at last night's game against Northwestern. Northwestern shot like 65 or 66% on twos against them, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. I know the guards did a lot of that damage, it looked like, from a quick look at the box score, but kind of strange to me. So I think, on the defensive end, they started the season really well. I think they've struggled with allowing teams to get open looks from deep, particularly on ball movement and things like that. So that hopefully bodes well for IU. At least I know a couple of the Purdue folks that I do follow on Twitter have expressed some concern about that aspect of the game. They don't turn people over, which is, as we all know, is good news for IU, although I feel like we said the same thing going into the Michigan State game. What they do well is prevent offensive rebounds, which is not surprising. So they're first in the league in defensive rebound percentage, and as we all know, that's an area where IU has done really well. So that's a early area to watch, I think, as you look at that, and certainly IU shooting, as it always is. And then on the flip side, Purdue's kind of middle of the pack offensively as well. Their 2-point shooting percentage. This is another stat that jumped out to me that just seems crazy. They're 10th in 2-point shooting percentage in Big Ten games, and I know a couple of the people that I follow last night were making mention of them taking a lot of mid-range jumpers, which is one thing that IU has really done a great job of staying away from, essentially trying to take either shots in the lane or threes. That's had an impact on that. But again, you would think with the size, it just seems completely counterintuitive that they'd be shooting that way from 2-point range, and they're again kind of middle of the pack on the 3-point side. And when you look individually, Hammonds is the guy that scares you. He's really been their most consistent player by a pretty wide margin as you look down their roster this season. I did a little bit of looking today, and you've got a number of guys who can score in double figures and have scored in double figures for them this season, but no one has done that consistently lately, with the exception of Hammonds. So a huge challenge for Thomas Bryant, Max Bielfeldt, and really the whole team in figuring out how they're going to defend him. Are they going to double and try to force guys to make threes, force him to make passes out of the post? I think that's probably the one matchup that you have to watch the most. Everybody else for Purdue has been pretty up and down. Raphael Davis had 24 against Michigan State, and he's got 6 points combined in the last 2 games. Vince Edwards had 5 straight in double figures with single digits in the last 5. Haas, I think they're, with all the size they have, they really can't play him more than 12, 15 minutes a game, so he's been up and down. The point guard play has been up and down, and really guard play in general has been a concern for them. And even Caleb Swanigan, who had started really well, has struggled after an ankle injury. So, it feels like what we've said a lot about IU is that, how do you figure out who what to expect things for? And I think Hammonds is the one guy who Purdue knows what they're going to get from him on a night-in, night-out basis. Pretty much everybody else is kind of a wild card for them at this point, and so be interested to see how those guys respond to being in a tough environment. They certainly played well there last year, and the veteran guys, at least on their team, will have that to fall back on. But again, I think guard play, outside shooting have been the 2 bigger issues for them over the course of the season, and hopefully a game where Yogi can really dominate the game from just controlling the possessions, making good passes, setting guys up, and keeping the ball moving, which I think will bode well for IU as Purdue's had a little bit of struggle on that side of things defensively. So certainly a challenge on the inside, but I think IU's got to figure out a way to stop Hammonds and then see what happens other than that, make some guys hit shots and then adjust from there as opposed to the other way around.
The burning question I have, Andy, is how much will Indiana miss Stan Robinson's interior defense against the 7-footers for Purdue?
It's tough. It's tough. It's so funny to look at this team from year to year, though, the rosters where it's like, all the years where we've lamented, man, if we just had another couple big guys or whatever, and then this year it's like you don't have enough guards, and we're trying to figure out, well, all these guys are playing well. You got Bryant, you got Bielfeldt, you've got Anunoby, Morgan, Hartman, Williams, all front court guys, and you're trying to figure out how you can, like, we're trying to figure out how to get Jawan Morgan more minutes when it's like, God, we would have killed to have him in this game last year where you're playing Hartman and Stan Robinson against Hammonds in the post. So I guess the good thing for IU is they got a lot of bodies they can run at those guys. I think that'll definitely be important. Try to get him flustered a little bit would definitely help things.
If you want to know if you're an IU basketball diehard, if you laughed at that Stan Robinson joke, you are a diehard because that's a deep cut right there. That is a deep cut. All right, so real quick. So we got to do our picks. We got to go to last call real quick before we do that. Just a reminder, make sure that you get on the email list. Go to assemblycall.com/subscribe or text Indiana, INDIANA, to 44144. You'll get a reply message back. Reply to that with your email address, and you will be on the list. You will get our email tomorrow morning at 6:30 Central Time with our analysis of the Nebraska game. You'll get all the rest of the emails that we send this season. It is a great way to connect with the show and get extra insight that a lot of times we don't have here because we only have an hour to talk about these games, but there's more to discuss than just that. So make sure you get on the email list. There's almost 1,700 IU fans on there, so you want to join them. Get on the list, assemblycall.com/subscribe, or text Indiana to 44144. Alrighty, folks, we are wrapping up this episode of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. The Hoosiers win tonight 80-64, and as we sit right now, your Indiana Hoosiers are 11-3 in the Big Ten, in first place in the Big Ten, tied with Iowa, technically a half game ahead of Iowa since we beat them. Of course, all of that will even itself out over the course of the season, but who cares for now? Take a look at those standings, enjoy them, allow them to send you off to bed tonight with happy thoughts. And also sending you off to bed tonight with happy thoughts will be our pick for the IU Purdue game and last call. So let's go around the horn. Will, of course, is not here, so he gets the customary pick of Purdue because whoever's not here gets stuck, just like Ryan picked Rutgers. But let's go to Andy.
I did not! I did not! I emailed you my pick, and I have that emailed, Morris. I want my trophy at the end of the year.
Andy, IU or Purdue? Who you got?
I've got to take IU. Not only so I can sleep at night, but also just, until this team loses at home, I struggle to pick against them. I know you referenced a couple times that Gary Parrish had said on the CBS podcast that I'm not sure anybody would be favored going into IU right now. It's somewhat a commentary on the college basketball season that has been so far, but also on how well IU's played there. So I think that place is going to be pretty amped up, even though the game day folks decided to go to Texas A&M for reasons unbeknownst to anyone. I think there'll still be a pretty vibrant crowd there, and everybody's going to be ready to go, and I'm going to take IU at home.
I can't make any comments about the A&M thing because Heather is a big A&M fan. I think it's very exciting for the Aggies that they get to have game day there.
Certainly would have been had they not been in a tailspin for the last 2 weeks, but other than that, no big deal.
Jared, you're married. It doesn't mean you're dead. Come on now, man.
Good point. Ryan, IU or Purdue?
If this were at Mackey, I would probably pick Purdue in a close one. But the Assembly Hall has been magic this year. The fans have been great. And Indiana's just played well at home. I'm going to have to go with Indiana. This was a tough one, though. I did think about it. I mean, obviously, I want to pick Indiana because, as Andy said, so I can sleep at night. But if you're really analyzing this game and looking at the strengths and weaknesses, that interior size is really going to be tough for Indiana, but I think they figure out a way to go at it. I think they've made some really good adjustments in-game this year, especially in some of the more important games, and really changed things. And been able to change games with it. If Thomas Bryant stays out of foul trouble, I think IU wins by 10. If he's in foul trouble, I think it's going to be a close one that goes down to the buzzer. But I would pick Indiana at home right now, probably against anybody, because they're just playing so well there. And as Andy pointed out in his analysis, a lot of Purdue's individual players have been up and down. So I'm gonna stick with Indiana and feel confident about it.
Yep, I'm sticking with the Hoosiers too. I mean, again, we talk about the Assembly Hall magic. Until someone beats Indiana, the men's or women's team at home, how can you pick against Indiana in Assembly Hall? And I think, Andy, you mentioned some of those numbers for Purdue. They're not turning people over, only turning opponents over on 13.2% of their possessions in Big Ten play. And frankly, this Indiana team is dynamite when we don't turn the ball over. And kind of quietly, we've been improving with the turnovers. Tonight we had 6 pretty early, and then we only had 6 for the rest of the game, and I think kept it around 18%. In terms of a turnover rate for the game. Even in the Michigan State game, didn't turn it over quite as much. So we're kind of slowly but steadily seeing some improvement in turnovers. And for a team that has one of, if not the best offenses on possessions when they don't turn it over, that makes you feel good in terms of a matchup. And then Purdue is first in the conference in both offensive rebounding percentage and defensive rebounding percentage. But frankly, Michigan State was really good too. Michigan State was second, I think, in terms of their defensive rebounding percentage, and Indiana still held their own from a rebounding perspective. And I think this Hoosier team has proven that they will rebound pretty much on a night-in, night-out basis. And so I think even with Purdue's size, they're likely to out-rebound us, but I think Indiana can keep it close enough to where that's not going to be a huge advantage for Purdue. And then you got this Indiana team shooting the ball at home. I think the fact that Purdue is on the road lessens the likelihood that one of their guys, their non-big guys, is just going to go off. So for all of those reasons, I really like Indiana's chances. And frankly, I think Yogi, in his last scheduled game against Purdue, obviously he could play him again in the Big Ten tournament, but his last scheduled game against Purdue, with how some of his shots looked in the second half, I know we've been saying it for a couple of games, but I think the Purdue game is where he just blows the lid off of it and maybe makes 4 or 5 3-pointers, gets everybody going. So I like the Hoosiers. I think we come out, play really well. I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll be a hard-fought game, tough as nails. But I think especially at home, Indiana can win games like that, and I think they will come out and do it Saturday against Purdue. And, of course, after that, we'll be here to break it all down on the Assembly Call, hopefully a victorious episode, because victorious episodes after you play Purdue are always the most fun episodes. All right, let's go with last call, fellas. Andy, we'll go last call to you first because I know you're itching to start working on bracket stuff.
Yeah, it's these late games are really not great for me in the Eastern time zone. I need to move and live with Ryan for like a month and see how that goes. Maybe it'll be a little bit easier to get things done.
I don't have a basement for your captors to hide you in, so I don't know how it's going to work.
Yeah, why aren't you the bracketologist, Ryan? Seriously.
Nice.
Because Andy is so good at it that I couldn't try and fill those shoes.
No.
There we go. I guess the one thing that I mentioned after the last game, I know it wasn't on the show, but you kind of looked at these next few games as being so critical for IU. So 1 down, 2 to go. Taking care of business in this one was certainly not going to impress anybody, but also was something that needed to happen. And at this point, even more so now than over the weekend, IU certainly controls its own destiny with the Iowa loss at Penn State. So if IU can win this game, they've got another home game coming up where they haven't lost, and then a winnable road game at Illinois. That 3-game stretch seemed really important, and so they're a third of the way through it. Things have gone well so far, and I think you have to feel good about that. As Ryan said, regardless of kind of how they got here and anything else, they're in position to be able to win right now if they take care of business, and they've got games against everybody they need to beat coming up, and it's a good chance to prove themselves. So in that regard, I think it's off to as good a start as you can expect for this little mini run here, and we'll kind of see what happens. But I think it's while a little bit of an inauspicious start to this game, it certainly turned around and looked good. So everything's right in front of this team at this point, and they just need to keep it up. So hopefully, big game against Purdue on Saturday for sure, and excited to see how these guys come out. I think it's certainly not a game, perhaps in contrast to tonight, that is going to be a little bit hard to get excited for, despite Star Wars night and all the hullabaloo around that in Bloomington. Certainly Purdue coming into town. Anybody that was on the team last year that was part of that loss is going to be ready to avenge that, and I think that's going to be really important. Guys are going to be ready to go. So really looking forward to that one, and again, took care of business when they needed to, and let's hope for more of the same. Keep that home win streak alive, and move on to the next one.
Yeah, maybe that was the difference, is that Troy was using the Force tonight with all the Star Wars stuff. And
we'll have Star Wars night every night then, because whatever happened tonight, I think needs to be exactly the same for him. When he got to the arena, what he ate for dinner, what they said to him at halftime, what he drank during the game, I don't care what it was. Everything needs to stay exactly the same, because if that version of him shows up, this team can be really good. And I think as you alluded to either on the show or on Crimson Cast this week, this team can win when he's not playing well, but they're at its best when he is, and if he plays like he did tonight, I think we're in for hopefully a lot more of these shows as we move forward into tournament time.
Ryan, last call.
I'm going to end it with what I started with. This team's 11-3 in the Big Ten, tied for first, has the head-to-head advantage with the team they're tied with. The other 2 teams with only 3 losses in conference are both coming off losses now. This team hasn't had a losing streak all year. They've bounced back well. They're 21-6 overall. Probably, as Andy said, probably about a 6 seed in the tournament. But the key thing here is they're 11-3 in the conference and control their own destiny. If this team wants this Big Ten title, it can go get it. I mean, it's right in front of them. And take care of business on Saturday against Purdue. Go to Illinois and win a game you should win. Then, hey, you've got 2 games left against the other top 2 teams in the conference and a chance to take the Big Ten title. How many seasons has Indiana been able to say that in the last 20 years? Not many. And so people should be really excited about this opportunity. People need to show up at that Purdue game and be loud. Not just loud when it goes well. Start being loud 5 minutes before the game starts and be loud 5 minutes after it's over. You know, this is the kind of thing where the crowd can lift that team, and the crowd needs to be a big part of that victory. And I think it's going to be a victory, and I think the crowd needs to be involved and help those guys along. This team is becoming a great story, how they've turned their season around after that Duke loss when everybody buried them. Everybody nationally buried them. Dick Vitale, Mr. Relentless Positivity, was just throwing shade on IU in that game. I mean, about their defense and things like that. And that's a guy who always talks positive about everybody. So the fact that we went from there to here and have had, there's been some slip-ups. There's been some poor, performances and whatnot. But there's still 11-3 with a few games left and a chance to control their own destiny and win a Big Ten title. That is unbelievable what these kids have done, and they have a chance to make it a really special season. And it's on us to cheer them and celebrate their accomplishments as they go forward. So just be excited about this team in this game, what they've done and what they're capable of, and we'll see what happens. I mean, but if you're anything but excited right now as an Indiana fan, you're not really a fan. I mean, this is what our lives are built around. Our sporting lives are built around. Our lives as fans are built around. Is moments like this and stretches like this where this team has a chance to do something very special. So get excited and stay excited. This is going to be fun. So, I'm excited. I'm ready to go. I don't know if you can tell, but let's do this.
You are ready to go. And more so than just being excited, be confident. Like, start to have confidence. Like Ryan said, this is not a team that has lost 2 games in a row all year. This is a team that has continued to improve since their December doldrums. But I'll go back to what I've said a lot, which is let's not give this team extra credit just because they fell on their faces early in the season. Because I think what happens when we do that and when we constantly harp on Maui and Duke is we kind of start to feel like this team isn't as good as they are. And we start to feel like there's some kind of plucky underdog that's playing above their heads to beat 11-3. Remember back to the beginning of the season, this was a top 15 team, and we all said that the minimum expectation was competing for a Big Ten title and making it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, which is exactly what this team is doing. And I think losing to Wake Forest, losing to UNLV, and getting blasted by Duke, made us lose sight of how good this team can be because, frankly, they hadn't shown us, and it was warranted at the time. And what the team has shown us since then is that they've become what we thought they could become. And so Purdue isn't coming in here to Assembly Hall. We don't need Assembly Hall magic to upset Purdue. We're favored over Purdue. We should beat Purdue. That game at Iowa is going to be a very difficult test, but we've beaten Iowa once already. And hopefully we learned a lesson from the loss at Michigan State, and we'll be ready to play up there. And Maryland's going to be a top 10 team when they come into Assembly Hall, but we're going to be favored in that one because we beat them at home last year. We've always played well against them, and we are a really good team. This is a team that's back firmly in the top 25, continues to move up in everybody's brackets, and it's time to not just be excited, but start to be confident. I think it's okay to embrace this team. A lot of people have kept them at arm's length because even when things were going well in January, you start to fear, okay, well, maybe that February swoon is going to come. Well, the team keeps winning games. They played great against Michigan. They beat Iowa, win a game like this against Nebraska. So they're showing no signs of having that February swoon. Embrace this team, have confidence in them, and let's get going. And if you want a little bit of perspective, before the season started, we talked about how this team, this 2016 team, reminded us of the 2011-2012 Hoosiers, right? A team that was going to be elite offensively, that had a chance to be decent defensively, and that's a team that struggled early in Big Ten play, got hot late in the season, ended up going to the Sweet 16. That team, which finished 27-9, made the Sweet 16. They were 20-6, just like this year's Indiana team is. The difference is they were 8-6 in conference, having gone through a really rough stretch in January. So they were 8-6. They ended up losing that 15th game in conference play against Iowa, and then won their last 3. Indiana, of course, won their game today. They're 21-6. Now, can they win the next 4 games? I don't know if they'll win all 4, but I certainly like them to win at least 3 of them and to finish this season strong. And look, if they do that, and if they can get, just get into the NCAA tournament as we know they are, get a decent matchup, this is a team that has everything going for it to make a run. It's what we thought before the season, and all they've done is show us that we can believe in them again. So do it, get excited, and it all starts Saturday night. Purdue's coming to town. Huge game, another chance to get a big win for the NCAA tournament resume. I'm confident. You should be confident. The Hoosiers are ready to get this W. We'll be here Saturday night after it happens to break it all down on the latest edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Until then, have fun. Check in on Andy's bracket updates the next couple of days, and we will talk to you Saturday night after IU Purdue. See you then, everybody.